Hey guys, it's Nailbiter, and I've got another Battlefield 3 video here for you guys. And in this video, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the patch and kind of my updated thoughts on it. And now that I've sort of been playing it for a week now, or just over a week, and you know, I've sort of gotten used to some of the differences or some of the changes that were made in the patch. And so I wanted to talk a little bit more about it and a little bit about some of the things that I didn't get a chance to talk about in the first video that I posted about the patch. And then I also wanted to talk about this setup that I'm using, because I've been messing around with some of the different weapons, and this is actually one of the things that I did want to talk about. But I mentioned in the channel update video that I posted about a week ago now that, you know, I wasn't as interested in Battlefield 3 as I had been when it first came out. And I found that since this patch has come out, and you know, some of the weapon statistics have been changed, and you know, they've been changed around in the attachments, and what they do has been changed around. It's been kind of fun to now have to try to get used to some of these weapons again. I think part of the reason I was having less fun with Battlefield 3 is that I had sort of new, there wasn't anything like new for me to discover in the game. I'd kind of tried out everything and knew what to expect from all the weapons and stuff. And now I've kind of been able to go back and play around with some of these different setups again and try out some new attachments and you know, get used to some of these weapons again. And it's been kind of fun to just mess around with some different setups. So in this video, the setup I'm using is the L85A2 with the well, the first couple of clips I'm going to have no scopes on it, but later on you'll see I've got the holographic sight on it, and I actually really liked the holographic sight on this weapon. I found it worked really well, so I would use that, even though the first couple clips of this video I'm just gonna have the iron sights on. But I'll have the holographic scope on later, and then I've also got the foregrip and heavy barrel attached to the weapon. And it's this is a setup that I've used for a couple of rounds last night, and I was having quite a bit of success with it. I think it's a very good setup, and the L85 is definitely a good weapon, which is, I think, what we had expected. They're sort of the notes from before the patch was released, or from the notes that before the patch was released. People have been saying that the L85 was going to be a good weapon to use after the patch, and that's definitely the case. So this is a solid setup to use. I think it works pretty well. And another quick side note about the setup that I'm using is I also had the M9 pistol as my secondary, and for whatever reason I really liked this pistol. I don't know what it is, but for whatever reason I was you'll see later on in this clip I get a bunch of kills in a row with it, and I don't know, for whatever reason I was having a lot of fun with the M9. So that's another pretty good pistol, I think, to use if you're, you know, looking for good secondaries to use, along with the Magnum. And I think the Rex is also supposed to be a pretty good pistol, or a pretty good secondary at this point as well. So that's something that you can try out. But back to the L85 quickly. It's kind of similar to the G3. It's got, especially with the heavy barrel on it, the hip fire isn't great, and along with its sort of slow fire rate, it's a little bit difficult to do really well at close ranges. I'd say it's much more of a medium range weapon, and long range it's not as good either, just because of that slow fire rate. And it does have a fair amount of recoil to it, so it can be sometimes tough to control at really long ranges. But it does do quite a bit of damage, so generally speaking, it's sort of similar to the G3. It doesn't do quite as much damage as the G3, but you know, if you fire in 2 to 3 bullet bursts, you should have a fair amount of success with this weapon. And you'll see it does have a fair amount of recoil with it, and that's why I added this scope on later in this video. I decided to put the holographic scope on it, just because it would make it easier for me to keep my aim accurate and you know, keep it precise. And that definitely helped out quite a bit. So this is probably a weapon that I would use a scope on of some sort, if not the holographic scope, then something else that you like using, that you're comfortable with. I've been using the red dot sight a little bit more recently. I've actually been using scopes a little bit more recently, just in general, because as I'm trying to get used to the weapons, I don't really want to handicap myself. So, you know, until I get really pretty comfortable, or more comfortable at least, with these weapons, I'll probably be using scopes a little more often, just to, you know, to put myself in the best possible situation or position to succeed. So one final thing I wanted to quickly say about the setup that I'm using, and I've kind of noticed this just with all the weapons in general, or at least all the assault rifles that I've used so far, post-patch, but what I've noticed is that it seems like the heavy barrel, at least for me, the heavy barrel is my favorite third slot attachment to use on these assault rifles. And I think the main reason for that is now that the foregrip and laser sight setup has kind of been nerfed down a little bit, and it's not as, it doesn't take away as much recoil as it did before. I think that the heavy barrel is probably the best attachment to use for that third slot, because it gives you sort of added damage at longer ranges, and I think it also increases your accuracy when you're aimed down sights, and so those are both pretty good benefits to have. And it does increase your recoil, I think, slightly, but as I mentioned earlier, I decided that when I put a scope on this weapon, I definitely found that I didn't have too much of a problem with controlling the recoil. And so, you know, as long as you use a scope that you're comfortable with, I think the recoil shouldn't really be a problem, and you can kind of minimize any of the negative effects that the heavy barrel does have. So I think it's definitely a worthwhile attachment to use. I have tried out the flash suppressor on a couple of different weapons, but I find I don't like it as much. I think the flash suppressor does reduces more recoil than the heavy barrel does, but it doesn't give you that added range like the heavy barrel does. And what I like about the added range is that it just gives me a little more flexibility when I'm playing, and I'm able to have more success in more situations than I would be if I only had the flash suppressor attached. So I find in general that I like to, instead of sort of specializing in one type of encounter, I like to have that flexibility as I'm playing, and I find that's what I have the most success with. And especially with a weapon like the L85, which already has a pretty slow fire rate and isn't as good at close ranges like the AEK or the FAMAS, it's by adding the heavy barrel, you're not going to really notice the negative effects that it has on your hip firing as much, just because the L85 really isn't that great at hip firing anyways. So at the same time, by attaching the heavy barrel, you're going to be making its medium to long range capability even better, which is, I think, where the L85 excels anyways. So the heavy barrel is definitely an attachment, I think, that complements this weapon, and it's definitely, I think, the best weapon or the best attachment to use for this L85. So that's probably what I would recommend, and I've definitely been having success with this setup, and I think it's definitely one that's worth trying out. Now for the last couple minutes of this video, I just want to talk a little bit more about suppression, because you know, a lot of people have been complaining about the suppression effect and how much it can mess up your shooting, and just how annoying it is, and how it doesn't really need to be in the game. And you know, on the one hand, I can understand where those people are coming from. It can be quite annoying when, you know, somebody's shooting at you and you just cannot hit. You can't hit them at all when you shoot at them because of suppression. It just makes it impossible, and your bullets fly everywhere. But at the same time, I think that honestly, it's not worth the amount of complaining that I've seen from people. I don't think it's as bad as people are making it out to be. You know, maybe once or twice in a round I'll get into a situation where it really screws me over, but honestly, for the most part, it hasn't affected my playing too much. And I think that as long as you just play kind of smart and use cover effectively, that it shouldn't really pose too much of a problem. And you know, I mean, I don't really understand exactly why they wanted to, you know, make these changes so drastic originally. You know, the thought that suppression should mess up your aim as much as it does is kind of strange. I don't know where that came from, but you know, again, I'm just trying to say that I don't think this change is as big a deal as it's been made out to be, and you know, I think it's something that everybody who plays can adjust to. So that's just about all I really wanted to say for this video. I talked a little bit more about the setup that I was using in this gameplay than I had originally planned on doing, and so I didn't get a chance to talk as much about the patch and to say everything that I wanted to say about it, so I might talk a little bit more about that in a future video. And I'm actually curious what you guys think about the suppression effect, so let me know if you agree or disagree with what I said about it, based on, you know, what your experience playing the game since it's been patched. And otherwise, thanks for watching this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys later.